What's going on, everyone? Today is January 15th, 2025. You are tuned into the Invest in Hockey podcast. My name's Anthony Santini. Today I'm joined here with,
Eric Wilson.
and we are going to talk a little bit of NHL hockey today. It is the first episode of 2025, and what's been a good 15-day start to the year. Eric, what have you been up to?
You know what? I've been up to a lot, but not enough. And when I mean not enough, I have not watched enough NHL hockey. So it has been a great 15 days, but a lot of catching up to do in the NHL, and I'm happy we can unpack that today and share our opinions, outlooks. What have you been up to?
I've been chilling, man. I mean, we had a little bit of a later start. I had the nice long Christmas break, which was sweet. First 2 weeks of school are almost in the books. First week went really well. Second week going pretty good halfway through right now. And yeah, I got a little bit of assignments. Obviously, Friday got a big paper due, but I'm halfway done, so we're feeling good. I've watched a decent amount of hockey, though. I want to kind of start off and talk a little bit about the World Juniors. Not too much about it, though, because I know we were disappointed with the result. But obviously, I just wanted you to touch on kind of the World Juniors in a whole. Obviously, a lot happening for Team Canada talking about Easton Cowan, talking about the loss to Latvia, talking about the loss to Czechia again in the quarterfinals. It's been a very tough skid for Team Canada. What do you expect next year, and what did you think about this year's performance?
Yeah, you said it well with, the disappointments and what needs to be done next year. I think 100% you're going to see a new coaching staff. I know it happens most of the time where the coach is different and management looks different, but one thing that is a little non-roster related that I found interesting was that all the practices were canceled. I
I
don't know.
saw that.
I don't really know much about that, but it seems like something interesting that kind of professionals would know this best, but it would mess with your routine if you're used to practicing every morning and you don't practice for 2 weeks, even if you're playing that day, right?
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, a couple tough and weird decisions, obviously, by management with choosing the roster as well. I know that was a massive discussion that was talked about throughout the tournament. And it was weird because even though I definitely didn't agree with what and who they brought to Ottawa to represent Team Canada, I do believe that they left a lot of people off, like Zane Perrick, obviously Michael Misa, a lot of, or yeah, sorry, I keep getting his name mixed up because of our friend Matthew Misa, which
Yeah.
is absolutely, I got to get used to saying that, but leaving off Michael Misa, right? But people didn't mention it as much until Canada really started to perform poorly. I personally
Yeah.
thought. I mean, I do think the conversation was there when the roster was released, but people weren't as vocal as they were, especially after that Latvia loss. I mean, in general, I was definitely disappointed with Team Canada. I do think next year they should make a little bit of an improvement to what was two back-to-back years of disappointment, but that's kind of where I have them at. I think next year they should hopefully get a medal at least. Like, not to get one this year is just ridiculous.
Yeah. I guess I should kind of mention my thoughts on the roster again. It's gonna look different, but the biggest issue that I have is half the people have said, "Oh, there's absolutely no physicality, want to win. There's no net front drive, presence. It's all outside hockey." But then the other half says, "Oh, you're leaving off all of this skill, like Misa Perek." I don't know really the others because I know there were some grit players left off. One being a guy like Matthew Wood, but I don't know where to draw the line. I don't know which side to agree with. So it's hard for me and hard for you, I'm sure, but we definitely um, try to take that unbiased perspective on this podcast, right? Where we kind of see all the views out.
No, for sure. I mean, hindsight's 2020, and if you're gonna tell me that losing to Czechia in the quarterfinals is a result of picking that team, it's tough to pick a team rather than an all-star team, and it sounds like hockey Twitter just wants to pick an all-star team every year at the World Juniors, which obviously would be fun to watch, but you do need a hockey team, which is totally understandable. Anyways, I think that's going to put a bow on what was a pretty awesome 2025 World Juniors. I enjoyed watching it. It was nice to see some players like Cole Eiserman and Hudson actually, who I didn't even know that Lane Hudson had a brother, but a very successful tournament for him. Was there any other players in this tournament? And I know you want to talk about Axel Sandin Pellikka, but was there anyone else that really stood out to you?
You know what? I'll mention the name now so I don't forget. But Viktor Eklund, brother of William Eklund. I
Ah,
had to watch him. I watched his highlights. He looked pretty good, and he should still be a top 10 pick in this upcoming draft. So, a name to not forget for the upcoming draft. But talking about drafted guys, I mean, yeah, Pelika stands out as like a um, just so dynamic on the point there. Like I'm not going to compare him to Rasmus Dahlin, but because they're both Swedish, I could see that, you know, young defenseman in a Swedish jersey in the World Juniors, and it just kind of
yeah.
reminded me of those nasty Dahlin tangles in the World Juniors. I'm sure you remember those too. But yeah, it just kind of like the Eiserman talk, I think we're on the same page there with the offense of the US just being like miles ahead of everyone else. So that was scary. Scary to watch those trios and duos on the States.
For sure. I mean, you got to think too, if Ryan Leonard's ready to maybe pack his bags, head to Washington, and be ready to play in the 2025 NHL playoffs for the Washington Capitals, I definitely think that is possible.
Yeah, it's getting, into that 60-ish percent of the season now where we're past halfway, and once that college season wraps up, the planes are ready. The might be helicopters for Ryan Leonard since
Huh.
he's dominating so much.
I definitely think so. I mean, I do want to transition now into the NHL and kind of what you've been looking at in the past couple weeks as we start the 2025 NHL, maybe back nine of the playoffs is a better word for it. And I know that watching the football game with a couple of the boys the other day, they were pretty interested to hear if you would have your pick yet for 2025, your 2025 NHL Stanley Cup winner, because I know last year you were super confident with Carolina. The year before you were even more confident to pick, I believe it was Vegas, and then the year before was Colorado. So we
Mhm.
were looking for the three-peat last year, didn't get it, but this year we are looking back, and I was wondering, I mean, have you put any thought to it?
I put thought to it, and the one concrete thought or concrete statement I will be able to say is that I will not be riding the Canes again. It's a pretty obvious one in my mind. They lost too much last year, and maybe slowly as we do every episode, I can narrow off a team. But I will say there are some sleepers that I'm totally interested in, and there are also some you know teams that I think will trend down a lot. So I really I don't have that answer, but I'm totally excited to chat with the boys here. Everyone's opinion when we have a nice pizza and beer one night or something. So.
Engage where you were at with picking that NHL team if you were going to end up picking the Vegas Golden Knights again, because I know that's a team that I feel has overperformed, but has been very good as well.
Yeah, you know what? Vegas has been really interesting because you have a game where you get shut out to who was that? Who they got shut out to the other night? It was disappointing. They
Was
got
it
shut out.
Montreal?
Yeah, it might have been like Montreal where you get shut out by Montreal. You have Eichel miss a game randomly, just illness, and then they come back, they lose again, and so it was interesting. I think Vegas is a team to keep an eye on, but I also think they have a lot of similar I want to say similar role players. You sent me a text last night that kind of makes me agree with what you're saying, but I think you need to have solidified lines, and I don't think they have that right now.
Yeah, I mean for Vegas, obviously, the conversation we were having last night, I shot you a text saying that Pavel Dorofeyev is exactly what Victor Olofsson should have been. And Pavel Dorofeyev, if you don't know, had a hat trick on Tuesday and two goals on Sunday. He has 19 goals on the season for the Vegas Golden Knights, almost at that 20 goal mark, and it's not even halfway through the season or just about. Which is absolutely ridiculous to think that Dora 5 could be a 30 plus goal scorer. I think it should have been Olofsson. Barbashev kind of took his position as well on that left wing on Eichel's line. It was a good bet. I think it was just a bad beat. So for the Vegas Golden Knights, I personally think they're very strong. I mean, I want to get into a couple opinions more related to players than their actual teams. So from transitioning into who our Stanley Cup picks are, I know we will hopefully get into that near the end of the month. I want to play a little game called This or That for the rest of season. So for the rules and for the listeners right now, so you're building a fantasy roster and you need to add one player to each position. You can only pick one or the other. It's not about trading. It's not about draft picks, trading for picks. You need a fantasy team. You have one slot open. Who are you sliding into this position rest of season to win you the championship? Eric, I'm very interested to know who you're going to pick out of these two. I also want to know why you picked them. Don't give me too much detail. I just want to know who are you taking starting on our left wing. We're going to start off with Jake Guentzel or Lucas Raymond.
All right. It should be a no-brainer. I gotta go Jake Guentzel here. It's a very good little Tampa versus Detroit kind of look, but I gotta go Jake Guentzel. I like him a lot.
I mean, I do think that Gensel's a good pick. I don't think I like him a lot is enough to sustain that pick. Personally, I'm gonna go Lucas Raymond. I think if I had to pick, I would go Lucas Raymond. Gensel, who has been good, obviously plays on a line with Kucherov too, so you're kind of opening yourself up to the opportunity of getting Gensel through that. For those of you that don't know, Lucas Raymond has led the NHL alongside Zach Werenski in points since Christmas Day, I believe is the stat. He's been unreal. Detroit's also been unreal. They just lost last night to San Jose, I believe, which was their first loss of 2025. They were 7-0, I believe, starting out the year. Players like Patrick Kane, DeBrincat, even Lucas Raymond, Moritz Seider were really starting to find their form in the last week and a half. So me personally, recency bias, I'm taking Lucas Raymond. I do think Jake Gensel is just as good as a pick too.
Yes, and again, those are great points. I won't go on and on, but it's the 15th of January. They've played 8 games in 15 days. Raymond should be up there in points. Again, not to bash him, but he should be up there if they've played this much.
Yeah.
It is a great debate. You're right.
Next up here at the center position, we're going Logan Cooley or Anthony Cirelli rest of season. Very interested to know this one too. Both players very similar in season rank, very close in their production this year, but you can only pick one rest of season.
Okay. You know what? This one I love because again, it's rest of season. I believe Logan Cooley's the correct option, and I believe his opportunity in Utah is, the same, if not better than Cirelli's opportunity in Tampa Bay. He doesn't have quite the line mates that Cirelli might have, but Anthony Cirelli will be playing in the Four Nations face-off, so it's important to note he will not be getting a break. And for fantasy owners, we all will be having a break from fantasy hockey at some point with the Four Nations. So I'm going Logan Cooley. He's without a Dylan Guenther, but he has some might with a guy like Lawson Krause or a guy like Nick Bukestad. So he'll have the power on his line, and he just needs to find a nice scoring winger who Utah doesn't really have. But we'll figure it out somehow. Maybe a Clayton Keller. So yeah.
Yeah, and I saw that Dylan Guenther got injured. Do we know exactly what the injury was, or I saw that it's long term. I mean, I saw a couple videos, people saying that he's out indefinitely. I haven't found any information about what exactly was happening with him.
Yeah, it said just LBI, like lower body injury. I don't know. Maybe it's a bit of a uh, still getting X-rays and things, and not sure what
Wow.
what tower term is, but it sucks. It sucks for sure.
No, that's brutal. I mean, in the NHL, it is definitely different. You don't have to disclose as much information when you do have players injured. I actually just wanted to note on that too before we move on. Connor Ingram, goaltender of the Utah Hockey Club, who was said to be injured for around a month and a half. He's been out for a long time. He was on the IR, I believe. Unfortunately, over November, late November, and up until now, his mother passed away. That was the reasoning behind him actually being away from the team, and it wasn't an injury, even though it was believed to be the reason behind his absence from the team. So I believe that was a very professional move by the Utah Hockey Club to let him step away. And I did hear that from 32 Thoughts, the podcast from Elliot Friedman. So rest in peace, and obviously a little bit of a it goes to show how the NHL is so different from other sports, how other sports like the NFL, you really need to disclose these injuries exactly compared to the NHL where it's so broad in general.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very again a professional way of handling things and sad news that um you hope he was able to kind of have that time and recover and obviously
Hmm.
the condolences are out there for sure.
For sure. Moving on, we're going to look at our right wing position now. We're going to look at Martin Necas versus Kirill Marchenko. So, for Kirill Marchenko, personally, a big fan of Marchenko. I don't know though. I'm very interested for this one too because it feels like a landslide, but I want to know what you pick here.
Wow, you got me in the sewer even before I answer. That is a difficult question. Necas versus Marchenko. I gotta go Marchenko too. I don't know if you're going Marchenko, but I'm going Marchenko. He's just too electric. He likes to shoot the puck. Necas, I'd say, is a little more pass first player, but I gotta go Marchenko. Necas had way too hot of a start. Marchenko's continued that hot streak he had, and he's kind of just like thriving.
Yeah, I mean he looks amazing. It feels like a landslide in terms of Natchez should be over Marchenko when you start the season. You would definitely have
Yeah.
Natchez over Marchenko without a doubt, but the way that Marchenko has played over the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks to a month, definitely overperformed his contract. One of the actually best contracts in the league, I believe, 3 years, 3.25 million. Just ridiculous.
Wow. Yeah, honestly, that is I'm shocked about that, but I think yeah, in terms of value you're getting and talk about the will to step up in Columbus as a player after, you know, the terrible events that happened with Goudreau and everything. I think this team's really coming together and putting it out there every night, right?
Oh, 100%. Moving on here to our defense, and I want to do something with Zach Werenski. Actually, ended up changing my mind here because it's so tough to vote against Zach Werenski. But I'm gonna look at it, two defensemen that have definitely overperformed this year: Jacob Chychrun or Jake Walman. Jake Walman, who actually just came off injury, but still came out exactly how he was playing before injury, looked good too, and he is both defensemen actually the power play one defenseman for their respective clubs.
Yeah, it's really close to me. I see, two defensemen who have been moved around multiple times in their careers. Um and I see two defensemen who used to struggle defensively and have really improved their overall games, and that's kind of led to those offensive outputs. I'm gonna go with Jacob Chychrun here because he's proved everyone wrong this year, and he's stepped up, and he's kind of one of the reasons the Caps are first in league. Yeah, Jacob Chychrun for me.
Yeah, I mean, pretty good pick. Personally, I'm going with Chychrun as well, just because of how well Washington's been playing. I'm riding their hot streak. I still think they're a top three team in the NHL. We're gonna move on though to our right defenseman, and we're gonna go to Dougie Hamilton versus Evan Bouchard. Bouchard's people say struggling, but the numbers are still there. It's weird. I guess because he's not really putting up 100-point seasons as a defenseman. I mean, the numbers are still there.
Yeah, yeah, the numbers are still there. Um, but he's not on that Bush bomb pace where he's scoring, a goal every 5 games. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And I think it's one of those things where people see the highlights and they want to see the exciting, flashy stuff. And maybe Bouchard hasn't done that as much this year, but the Oilers are in a better spot than they were halfway through the season last year. And I think Um, he's been good enough. When we compare him to Dougie Hamilton, it gets really tough. I'm gonna go with Bouchard from a fantasy perspective and from a rest of season perspective. I think that um, his points will exceed Hamilton's, but I think Dougie's still up there. I just think he's logged a lot of minutes, and I'm almost a little concerned they need to maybe rest him a little bit going forward with their defensive depth. I think they can handle that.
Yeah, I think because they're aiming for a deep playoff run too. And I mean, when you have a player like Luke Hughes that could step in, be just as efficient on the power play, I think it is fair. Could be an opportunity for Dougie to take a step back, play less minutes, maybe play him 14, 15, 16 minutes. Don't push for that 20-minute mark that we know he definitely could play. I want to stick to our last and maybe our most important position. Two players that have really changed the looks of their respective teams. Gus Bus, Gustafsson versus Jacob Markstrom. Two goalies that you used to own in fantasy, or I believe you still have Markstrom, but traded Gus Bus. I want to know what your opinion is here. No bias, no nothing. I need to know rest of season. Who are you taking?
All right. It's a very good question. And of course, I have to put the bias aside. If you ask me this question at the start of the season, I'm going to stick with my answer. Markstrom is the answer. It's very close. The Devils are a safer team to back. And I think that Gustafsson will not get those starts against those few weak teams, especially a team like Chicago who's in their division. They trust Fleury enough to play him. When it comes to Markstrom, you still have a similar position where you have a guy like Allen backing him up, but Markstrom plays really well against kind of any opponent. It's not like he puts up great numbers against other divisions or just his division, but he's been consistently good, and I trust his track record. I think he's found his home in New Jersey for the next 3, 4 years even, and I think like that team's a little stronger than the banged up Wild who are missing their top two defensemen right now.
Yeah, I mean, pretty good analysis there. I personally would take Markstrom as well. I think that it's already very impressive that the Gustafsson versus Markstrom conversations are even occurring compared to Markstrom at the beginning of the year being borderline, maybe the backup goaltender. Still a great goalie, but it was a conversation for who was going to be the starter there. Shout out both of them for having a good season. Shout out you for taking both of them in the draft. Obviously, moving Gus Bus a little early. But
Yeah.
even still, a trade is a trade, so you know how I feel about that. I
Oh,
want to move on though, and I want to fly through these. I want you to rank for me. And a little bit of a special shout out to our good buddy Landon Moss, realtor. Actually, I do have his I did have it. Here it is. I do have his Remax card right here. If you are looking for a there we go. If you are looking for a Remax agent, I want you to take a look at our boy Landon Moss, who is in the Oakville and Milton area. So shout out Landon Moss, salesperson for Remax. Actually, a big fantasy hockey player, and I wanted to do this little segment for him because I know he is listening, and was inspired by him. So.
yeah.
For those of you that don't know, he has the three-headed monster in fantasy. And the three-headed monster is Cale Makar, Nathan McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen. Absolutely ridiculous. First of all, I don't know how it happened, but it got us to the point where today it has inspired the opportunity for Mr. Eric Wilson to rank these stacks. So, Eric, four stacks. I want you to rank them. First, we're going to go with the Buffalo Sabre stack. We're starting with Alex Tuck, Dylan Cousins, Tage Thompson. Then we're moving over, same division, to Voronkov, Monahan, Marchenko.
Okay.
Moving over out west to Kevin Fiala, Anze Kopitar, and Kempe.
Yeah.
And then flying over to go visit Matt Boldy, Eriksson Ek, and Kaprizov.
Ooh,
So as of right now, we're looking at the Sabre stack, the Blue Jacket stack, the LA Kings stack, and the Minnesota Wild stack. What do
okay.
you think?
Yeah. So I'm trying to count four on my fingers and not doing well there. But anyways,
Uh-oh.
I gotta go with the Minnesota trio to start. Undoubtedly, I actually saw they potted a goal tonight. I know Bold. I think it was Bold who scored, and I think they scored a second as well. I'll go. Yeah, Kirill. He's having a career year. He's a Hart candidate. Um, yeah, Boldy's just that guy who can get it done, dual eligibility, and Eriksson Ek obviously with some injuries, but still can trust the guy. Um, I would honestly, sorry, so we're looking at Buffalo, Columbus, and LA still. So I would go with Buffalo second, and I think it's just because Alex Tuck is just severely underrated and he consistently produces. I think you don't really have a guy on LA out of those three guys that consistently produces as much as a guy like Alex Tuck. I think he kind of leads that whole line with Thompson, and I mean Cousins doesn't really play with them, but I'll take the three there. I think I'm not high on the Buffalo Sabres. Don't get me wrong here, but I would have to put the Kings in third behind them. I think Kopitar may be retiring soon, but he's still great. Kempe and Fiala just aren't superstars. They're kind of borderline elite slash top line talent, but I don't really look for those guys to like add to my fantasy team or to win me a week. I think they're just your good players on your team, you know? So
Yep.
yeah, that would leave me with the Voronkov, Monahan, and Marchenko trio. And
Okay.
it's simply just the name value is so far off the charts that um, even with a little bit of overperforming, we can't trust our fantasy squad with maybe, a duo or trio of them of those guys.
I mean, personally, and I might be a little bit out of left field here, I'm gonna put the Minnesota stack first, Boldy, Eck, and Kaprizov.
Yeah,
Then I'm actually gonna put the Columbus stack, Voronkov, Monahan, Marchenko. Then I'm going to put the Tuck Cousins Tage stack, and I'm leaving the LA King stack last. I don't think they're a high scoring team. Not a lot of fantasy output on that team, but that's going to do it for our rank these stacks. Again, thank you and shout out to our good friend Landon Moss, Remax
yeah.
agent right there.
Good
Let's get that.
professional guy. Yeah.
Can we get that all cleared out? If you are looking for his information, is online. Cheers for the idea. Thank you very much, sir. We very much appreciate it. But without further ado, and before we wrap up, Eric, I know you had four quick points that you wanted to talk about as we head into our new year.
Yeah, so um honestly was able to take a vacation a few weeks ago. Should shout that out because
Bang.
while I was on vacation,
Humble brag.
humble brag, you get to actually think a little freely, some less distractions. Cough, cough. But no, I'm just kidding there. But honestly, you get to think freely. You don't have, the data or the internet that you maybe always have. And it just really let me think about the fantasy world, think about the hockey world. And so I have these not necessarily questions, but a bit of takes, and I want to hear what you think.
I'd
Um,
love to hear him.
we're gonna start with
Dying to hear him.
new elite names. Part of the reason I made these was because I was trying to make some thumbnails for our YouTube episodes, shorts, things like that, whether they're fantasy related or not. But anyways, new elite names for 2025 that were not elite in 2024. I'll make that clear. So Connor Bedard is one who he was not a fantasy elite option last year. He was a rookie and he was injured a little bit. Um, and I believe for 2025, he is in the elite category. Um, I'll get your thoughts on all three afterwards, Sans. But Filip Gustavsson, who we chatted about a little earlier, he enters the elite convo and he will be the starting goalie for all of 2025. I don't see Wallstead even contending that until 2026. And Dougie Hamilton, I mean, he's just so consistent this year. I think last year, Luke Hughes actually hopped on the top power play for a bit because Dougie was injured. But he's an elite name that should stay there for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that it is fair to say that Dougie did have a great start to the year. Bedard had a slow start to the year, and Gustafsson had a slower start, but still showed the spurts of being a starter. That's what made him so valuable. I think you totally hit the nail on the head that Bedard definitely is an elite name now. Gustafsson as well. Hamilton, I will push back on. I do think that, like we mentioned before, with Luke Hughes maybe taking that power play one role, we could see a regression in production. I don't feel as confident to say that more than I would want to say that Bedard is an elite name for the rest of the season. So I do think that it's a pretty good discussion. Gustafsson, sorry, I do think it is safe to say that he is an elite top five goaltender in the league right now. If you are trading for him in fantasy, I do think you need to address him as so. Bedard, I think he is a project still, a lot of room to grow. Dougie Hamilton, I think I'm personally going to stay away though.
Fair, fair. Yeah, I think it was a good, three kind of names. Of course, there's gonna be some other names that are now elite. Um, I will go into my treading water category, and again, I want you to take in that this was done just before January 1st, so call it December 25th around Christmas. But treading water in for 2025, we have Ovechkin, Shesterkin, and Bouchard. So I'll just kind of explain these briefly, but with Ovi, I think that it's going to take more than this season to break the goal record, and I think that while there's no huge rush, he will break it at some point. I think that he's gonna have to tread water when it comes to 5-on-5 hockey, and for fantasy owners, there's going to be a slump at some point. It's undoubted. There's going to be a slump where Ovi has, you know, no goals in a 6 game span, and everyone looks for the goals. So we don't need to mention the shots or the hits, which they may come, they may not. I feel like he's treading water. Shesterkin we don't really need to explain because we know the Rangers situation, and it should kind of go up from here hopefully. And Bouchard we mentioned a little earlier in the episode. I think he's treading water. Again, I don't think he's regressing, and I don't think he has much upside.
Yeah, I do think that you mentioned a couple names that I feel a little bit more indifferent about on this side of it. Bouchard, first of all, 32 points in 43 games. I just want to double check this. 7 goals, 25 assists. The goals are not there. The power play points are not there this year. I think that's what really made him an elite defenseman last year. So I definitely do agree. I think he's treading water. Ovechkin, who's only proved to really score empty netters, we've talked about the last couple goals, which are pretty interesting. I do think it's a conversation that he is treading water ever since that injury, but undoubtedly one of the most offensively talented players to ever grace the face of the NHL. He
Mm.
was on fire to start the season, but that injury kind of set him back. And Shesterkin, who I definitely do think is the biggest buy low candidate out of all these players right now. I don't think the Rangers are going to be good this year. I do think that him signing his 8-year contract solidifies him at the starter position for the Rangers for the next minimum 5 years. So if you're looking at a good goaltender to buy low in a keeper league, I think you have to turn to Shesterkin, hands down.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Not
it.
down and out though.
Not down and out. What you're again? You nailed the nail on the head there with him as the buy low. Out of the three, 100%. No one's gonna sell Ovi low, and no one's really gonna sell Bush low just because the Oilers have an incredible amount of hype. I'm sure you can agree.
For sure.
I'll continue here. I know our episode has to wrap up. So I said down and out, we have Mika Zibanejad, Steven Stamkos, and Ilya Sorokin. And before you kind of chime in, I feel terribly about putting Stamkos in there, especially because he's on my fantasy team. But what do you think?
Yeah, I do think that even though you do have Stamkos, which I mean, I tried to get a trade done, but you valued him a little bit too high for me. Zibanejad, who started to play a little bit better as of late, actually missed a breakaway last night against Colorado. I was watching that game. It was a really sweet game to watch. Zibanejad, Stamkos, Sorokin. I do think with Sorokin right now, there should be more fantasy output, not enough. With Varlamov going down, he has not looked great this year. I think all three of these players are down and out. I wouldn't even really take a glance at them if you're looking to trade for them in fantasy, have any type of stock. in what they're all about. Maybe Sorokin of the three I would take a look at because he's proven to be an elite goaltender, but as of right now, just not playing well. Stamkos, we know what his resume is all about, but he hasn't been able to translate it ever since being traded to the Nashville Predators. And Mika Zibanejad, who's had a very tough year, but obviously in years past proven that he could be a top 15 center in the league when he's at his best, has not looked anywhere near close to what he is used to. So I'd say all three of these players are down and out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agreed. You're it's the constructive criticism that's like it's honesty. It's yeah. Sorokin being the one guy who has opportunity with Varlamov's injury. Well said. I am going to change my little pick your poison segment here, and I'm going to ask you something we haven't talked about all episode, and that is the rookie of the year slash Calder Trophy. So to end it off, who is your pick to win the Calder Trophy, and will that change before the end of the season?
I mean, my pick to win the Calder Trophy right now, I think it has to be Macklin Celebrini. And even though the hype is there for Lane Hudson, he's kept on producing. I don't think that it's enough to really take over Macklin Celebrini as the Calder Trophy winner.
Yeah, that's fair. I think again, even after last night, they get a big win there, and it might not impact the standings, but win's a win, and he's showing he has the speed undoubtedly and the size, at least playing like it, to play in the NHL. I want to say it's similar to a Bedard, where physically they were ready for the NHL, despite being smaller, shorter players, maybe. Meanwhile, you look at a guy like Jack Hughes, who was not ready his rookie year, and that's again totally okay, but something you notice, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know. It's tough because of the Montreal Canadiens type. I get it. I totally get it. But I just can't. He can't be my pick.
Yeah, I can't I can't give Hudson a vote there. I don't think it'll be interesting to see who these voters are and where they're from, but I don't think there's a shot at all. I think you're really just donating your money if you're gonna kind of throw something on Hudson, but yeah.
Yep. I mean, either way, I know that gives us a little bit of a wrap on what's been a pretty sweet podcast so far. A little bit of camera issues, no biggie, still was able to push through. And I know this one was a lot of fun. So hopefully everyone listening enjoyed it. Leave a comment, leave a like. We are looking for more interaction. So keep us posted what you guys think of the pod. Comment below what you think of the NHL season. And I really want to know everyone's Stanley Cup winner. But yeah, that's going to do it. My name's Anthony Santini. That's Eric Wilson. And together we are the Invested in Hockey Pod.